the MZ Studios Dallas virtual studios in cyberspace. This is Deconstructing Dallas. Greetings, everyone. It's your host, Ryan Trimble, coming to you today, again joined by my colleague and friend and fellow American, Shawn Williams. Shawn, good day, sir.
Hey, Ryan, good day. How are things in the Trimble household? Sounds like some yoga may be about to take place. Cosmic yoga.
Yes, we've located a fun kids yoga program that has been filling in for a PE class for us for the past few days. So it's a blessing. It is a blessing. How are you, Shawn?
I'm good. I was sans AC for a while, and so in our complex here. And so after about 3 or 4 days of no air on Twitter, I said it was kind of like being in the movie Do the Right Thing. For those of you who've seen that movie, I'm back. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful for AC and air.
He's back, baby. He's back. Well, we're glad you're cool as a cucumber again, Shawn.
Well, Ryan, we at Allyn Media, we like to get involved, and we like to make sure that we are on top of things going on in the community. And obviously, we would be remiss if we weren't, especially on this podcast, able to have a conversation and lend our thoughts and voices to what's going on across America and what's going on in our city. And all that is a result of the death of George Floyd, who was from Houston, Texas, and who was killed in Minneapolis, Minnesota, after an interaction that he had with a police officer, which resulted in his death. And then since then, we've seen protests across the United States. We've seen some of those protests devolve into chaos for whatever reason. And some of those reasons we can talk about, and some of those reasons, regardless, it is taking a lot of the focus and attention off the fact that people have been peacefully protesting the death of George Floyd and at the hands of a police officer. And we wanted to get into a conversation around that.
Yeah. So we tossed the idea around of doing a series of interviews around the topic, to see what local leaders and local voices have to say about it, and hopefully use our space as somewhere that can, voices and people can come together, to learn, to listen, and to move forward. I just on a personal note, I've always enjoyed our podcast, and we didn't set it up to be, an African American guy and a white guy doing a podcast in Dallas, but it is what it is. And, I always learn from you, Shawn, and, I'm grateful for our friendship.
Yeah, I think it is unique in a way, though, because we did know going in that you tend to be more to the right of issues. I tend to be more to the left, and which makes it an even more vital discussion because it's rare. Even if you just look at political lines. So if you look at political lines, if you look at race lines, it's rare for any venue where you have, and now if you think about it, a 2.5 year conversation that we've been having on anything. And so I think that, just from that standpoint, it's good. And it makes it even more poignant that we have an opportunity to both weigh in our thoughts on this. And so the way we're going to do that for our listeners is to have what is now a 4-part series. And if it ends up being more, then okay. But right now we're looking at doing a 4-part series that we're calling Where Do We Go From Here? And it is based off the title of a book written by Dr. Martin Luther King in 1967, Where Do We Go From Here? Community or Chaos? And Dr. King wrote this book as he was looking at a change in the movement that he had started as a nonviolent movement. And then the Black Power movement was beginning to take shape in the late 60s. And they had some civil unrest in cities across America. And he was talking about, what that means, why people resort to those tactics and what the frustration was. And I think that we're seeing similar frustrations and a similar point in time right now. And so I think it's a good title and a good guide for us to use as a jumping off point for this conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it. I think this is hopefully will help give our city maybe we can lead and show our city how to have conversations. So I'm excited about our guest today, Shawn. He is Father Josh Whitfield of St. Rita Catholic Church here in Dallas. He's the pastor at the church, and he's got some really interesting thoughts. We both got to listen to his homily from Pentecost this past Sunday, and where he spoke to a host of issues, really tipped off by the George Floyd murder, and jumped into the north-south divide here in Dallas, and just a bunch of other issues. So it was a great homily. We'll post it in the episode notes, and then I know Shawn, technical expert that he is, has got a couple clips queued up.
Yeah, as we're going in and out of breaks here, we're going to have an opportunity to listen to parts of that homily, and we will have not only in our show notes the link to the YouTube video that Father Josh gave on Pentecost Sunday, but also the transcript of the homily as well. We'll have in the show notes, and so as we go in and out of breaks, you'll hear some of the words, but we're going to take our first break. And then when we come back, we'll have our conversation with Father Josh. So this is Deconstructing Dallas. Shawn Williams, Ryan Trimble. We'll be right back right after this.
I think part of the problem is that we see these killings too narrowly. We analyze each incident, we dissect and judge the man. Why did he resist? Why didn't he just comply? Sometimes we judge the officer. We say he's poorly trained, a bad apple, maybe the product of a corrupt, inept department. When the riots break out, when violent masses take to the streets, when the fires begin, we're almost relieved not to have to think about what started it. Thankfully distracted by senseless anger and senseless violence. But we refuse to see the killing of a black man, of black men, as a social reality, as the symptom of a bigger problem. Or when we do offer broader commentary, especially we religious folk, too often it's just pious nonsense.
Welcome back, Deconstructing Dallas. Ryan Trimble, Shawn Williams. Shawn, it's a pleasure to be joined today by Father Josh. He, of course, pastor at St. Rita Catholic Church. Josh Whitfield. Father, thank you for joining us today. We always, off the top of the show, like to give our guests a little background on our guests. So, tell us about yourself, where you're from, and then tell us about your church.
Well, it's good to be on, by the way, and thanks for having me. I'm pastor of St. Rita Catholic Church in North Dallas. It's a big church. We got about 4,500 families roundabout, Catholic school, K through 8, 700 kids. And so I'm a busy guy. I'm a weird Catholic priest in many ways, in that I am married and have 4 kids, 10 years through 4 years old. And so I'm a really busy guy. Used to be, my hobbies are sitting down. So, but I used to be an Episcopal priest, and I went to Texas Tech, and then I went to seminary in England, and then came back and went to Duke for some graduate school, and have since becoming Catholic, and I was ordained. I've been working nonstop, and just blessed to be in Dallas. It's a great city.
Well, Father Josh, this is Shawn, and I heard a homily that you did on Pentecost this past Sunday, and I was very moved and inspired. And a lot of what I wanted to talk about and what we want to talk about is related to that. But in another conversation we had, you mentioned to us that you had done a thesis on Martin Luther King, and I wanted to start off with that, because a lot of what we're talking about is dealing with the kind of racial unrest and George Floyd and the shooting there. And there seems to be this image of Martin Luther King that often makes people, I'll say white people in America, feel safe, and they want to talk about the dream. But you've done a lot of studying on Dr. King, and then you've also talked a little bit about evolution, even from when you wrote your thesis. So can you talk about, maybe where you started as it relates to Dr. King, and then some of the other things that you've involved into your thinking since?
Right. When I was younger, I was very blessed to grow up in a middle class white household, and we were taught to celebrate diversity in the home, and so it was a very normal, peaceful existence. And as I grew up, I was naturally attracted to Martin Luther King Jr.'s preaching, to be honest. I mean, I'm a preacher, and I still to this day am in awe of his preaching, and falling in love with Dr. King in that way. You study his life, and you find yourself deep in study of the civil rights movement, and so in college I studied the bus boycott and the rest of his life, and felt myself, sufficiently enlightened. But as I grew up, and as I read more, as I came into contact with real African American experience and people, I discovered that my earlier experience of and knowledge of the civil rights movement, of Martin Luther King's life, was narrow, too narrow, right? And there is a mythology surrounding the civil rights movement and around Dr. King, which tames and makes palatable, the radical work that Dr. King was doing, and others like Malcolm X, and so I had to widen and broaden my understanding of what the civil rights movement really was aiming at, and not settle for that consensus mythology that a lot of us white people, just to be honest, can tolerate. And so it was real growth on my part. And that didn't happen until, late 30s, if I'm honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what brought us to this conversation, and many that we're having, is the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on what feels different about this moment. Why do you feel like we're seeing outrage regarding this death? We didn't see it to this level with Trayvon Martin, with Michael Brown, with Tatiana Jefferson. I mean, this feels different, at least to me, and what we're seeing. What would your opinion be of that?
I think it feels different too, and speaking with a number of my parishioners who've reached out to me, who have expressed an